Terrific. Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Stelter, president of the Stelter Company, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today. You're in for a treat. We're going to hear about how to earn their hearts and their support, a donor-centric approach to legacy giving, presented by two of our very own here, our own subject matter experts at Stelter, Katie Parker and Kit Lancaster. I'll get back to introducing them in a short minute, but first, just like to say a couple words around the webinar series. As many of you are familiar, as an industry leader, Stelter loves bringing these to you, complimentary, and is committed to providing these innovative solutions and a variety of educational opportunities to this industry. Again, we're happy to always provide these free and complimentary, as well as a whole slate of webinars throughout the entire year. Today's webinar is actually our fourth of our 2021 series. Later this year, you're going to hear from some amazing presenters, including a couple from the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy out in the UK, Jen Shang and Adrian Sargent. Jen will be teaching us how to love our donors, and Adrian will be sharing some advice from his 25 years of research on how to build donor loyalty. These are just two among many other speakers and presenters that will be sharing their wisdom with us throughout the year. And as always, you can register for any of these webinars at stelter.com/webinars. You can also view any of our archived webinars from Russell James, Catherine Myrie, a variety of other folks who have already graced us with some terrific talks earlier this year. Now back to the terrific talk. We're going to join our friends here. You'll see on your screen, Katie and Kit. Stelter's Content Director, Katie Parker, drives the content creation and strategy for all of Stelter's clients. She's a Data and Marketing Association certified marketing professional and is also has a certificate in legacy fundraising from Jen Shang and Adrian Sargent's Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. Katie joined Stelter in 2016, even though it feels like she's been here forever, in a good way, after 12 years at Better Homes and Gardens magazine. Kit Lancaster, Kit's role as client strategist for Stelter is to develop legacy and asset-based fundraising solutions for clients in the environmental, animal welfare, arts and culture, and public societal benefit subsectors. She has 15 years of experience in marketing communications, including more than a decade working in and with nonprofit. And then, yeah, you see me down there at the bottom of the screen. Kit and Katie kind of twisted my arm and wrangled me into some sharing some of my insights from my 20 years of working with nonprofits and their plan giving programs around the country. Fortunately, it's just going to be seeing me popping in a couple different times, providing a little color commentating here and there. So with that, I will pass it on to Katie and Kit.
We're glad to have you, Nate. Here's where we're headed. We are going to go through 3 sections today, starting with who gives legacy gifts. So this is really the best practice in list selection. We're talking about putting that donor first. That's the theme here. And so in part 2, we're going to get a deep understanding of that donor journey and their mindsets, and understand conversion and education and your marketing goals, and even how to create a strong call to action. But starting right here with who are the legacy givers? And this is the list portion of what you do every day. It's really, really important to get this right, and hence us starting there. As you look to 2, again, donor journey, donor mindsets, you'll learn about how a walk in the woods is a lot like a donor considering an estate gift. And finally, in part 3, lots of marketing tactics, using those list learnings, the journey development, and a lot of fun visuals to show you there. As a bonus, before you sign off this Zoom broadcast, we're going to give you 3 to-dos right there at the end. But let's get started with part 1. So who is a legacy giver? This slide reminds you why that question is so important. Enter the golden rule of marketing, otherwise known as the 40-40-20 rule. And this tells us that there's 3 core elements. And in marketing, that's list, offer, and creative. It's overlooked. It's more difficult to see, but targeting the right audience, that list, that's 40% of your piece's success. And it doesn't matter the message, how it looks, if you're not sending it to the right people. So audience selection is really the linchpin that's going to get you results. For example, consider the fruitlessness of sending any of the following messages. Maybe a coupon for cat food to a dog owner, or SAT prep materials, very timely here, to a family member with preschoolers, or a gardening magazine to an apartment dweller. The marketing, no matter how pretty, how compelling, how great an offer, it's going to be ignored. So in our world, these legacy givers, who are they? If you need a foundation, here's what Stelter recommends. These 3 core indicators that are going to target a donor's readiness for legacy or asset-based giving. Number one being loyalty and affinity. And we look at this as 5 or more years of giving or volunteering and 15 or more lifetime gifts. So 5 or more years of giving, volunteering, 15 or more lifetime gifts. If you're a higher ed or an organization with a less frequent giving cycle, you could look at those lifetime gifts as more like 5 times over the course of their lifetime. Age. This one's pretty obvious. I think we're pretty familiar, but the most prolific legacy gift marketing responders are 60 and older. But for that broader educational messaging, we look at 50 and older. And we'll talk more about that age group as we go. But remember, this gets me every time. The youngest boomers right now are 56 years old. And the third core indicator is recency of giving. And we're looking for some recency in the range of the last 3 to 5 years a gift has come into your organization. So those are core indicators, but I've got 3 more for you if your list sophistication allows you. These additional demographics have really positive correlations to a legacy gift, and that's being older, wealthier, and childless. And these stats, many of these are coming from Dr. Russell James. He looked at data from the Health and Retirement Study, which was a longitudinal study that tracked 20,000 Americans over the age of 50 between 1995 and 2006. And he found those that are older, and he did older as age 80 and up contributed 77% of all charitable dollars back at the beginning of that study in 1995. That's an incredible statistic. And wealthier. Dr. James found that individuals with a will had a higher socioeconomic status than individuals without a will. And if your will had a charitable component, you had a higher socioeconomic status than those with a will but without a charitable gift. And here's a really interesting one too, is this childlessness. The same study, there were about 10% of the respondents that were childless, but they accounted for almost 52% of all charitable dollars. That's amazing. So childless supporters are going to make great legacy prospects. Some more stats within here. Dr. James found that seniors who are childless are 5 times more likely to include a charitable gift in their will rather than their peers who had grandchildren. And let's remember, as legacy fundraisers, that birth rates have been falling. As we look at that childlessness and the growth of it, just another stat for you, women born in 1935, about 11% did not have children. For women born in 1960, who would be a little bit younger now, 15.6% did not have children. So even if you do have an heir, there's still some ways that make them a more compelling legacy giver. They're more likely to do this type of giving if they perceive that their children already have enough. What a great marketing tactic. We can really talk about how to protect your children with your estate or to help understand if they're secure. Or this one is a little bit giggle-inducing, but if they want to spite their family. So for whatever reason, they do not want their family getting their hands on their hard-earned money, so they give it away to charity. Just an interesting anecdote for you there. But wait, there's more. There's one more characteristic worth discussing, and that's people who volunteer. I've run up against this in some of my conversations with some of our nonprofits, that you say you're cautious about approaching your donors. You know, they already do so much. But if you're not able to ask them for a legacy gift, I can guarantee that other charities will do so. Volunteers, perhaps more than any other group, are going to get your organization. So sharing planned giving opportunities allows them to advance your mission in another way. So these stats that you're seeing come from Giving USA, and they published a research study called Leaving a Legacy, where they surveyed planned givers and planned giving prospects from a broad range of US organizations, and they were asking about legacy gift intentions and motivations. In the study, when they asked what affiliation the donors had with the organizations, and these are organizations getting their largest legacy gift, just over 25%, a fourth, had served as volunteers. That was second only to being an alumni of the organization. So you can see in the chart also board membership, staff membership, those were highly ranked as well. So in the same study, firsthand knowledge of your organization was cited as the third most common factor, and this fell behind mission, for choosing that organization to receive their largest estate gift. So engagement metrics like hours volunteered, events attended, these can be really helpful to you in determining their legacy giving likelihood. And you can create additional touch points. You're involved in that individual's life story. You're able to connect those stories of their life and your mission. As described in the Leaving a Legacy report, almost 80% of donors said they attend events hosted by the nonprofit. So this finding further reinforces other study findings that planned gift donors are very close to the organizations they support, and they might even be frequent faces in the organization's activities. So I hope you have an opportunity coming out of the pandemic to really talk with your volunteers, be with them, and appreciate them. So throughout this presentation, when we talk about legacy gifts or planned gifts, we're primarily talking about bequests, gifts in a will, and beneficiary designations as well. According to that same Giving USA report, more than 80% of planned gifts come in the form of gifts in wills. So all our conversation is focused on that donor. And then let's keep in mind some of these age materials as far as gifts in a will. The average age for creating a will in the US is 44. The average age for the first charitable component in that will is 52. So it's perfect if you're targeting people age 50 and older in your DRIP education. As we look at what causes people to change their wills, it's overwhelmingly changes in health, wealth, or family status, things you can't control. Among older living adults is about 55% of charitable estate components that remain in place for at least 10 years. That's 55%. You've got to stay on top of that. So the changes most likely to predict the removal of a charitable estate plan from their will are becoming a grandparent, becoming a parent, if they're stopping their charitable giving overall, or if they have a drop in self-reported health. So this all adds up to the importance of a marketing drip. It's the donor's timeline, not yours. And we'll get into this quite a bit more as we head into part 3. But first, part 2, the donor journey. Here I'm going to pass it to Kit, and she's going to walk you through this very important section.
Thanks, Katie. So today we're specifically talking about the donor's journey in becoming a legacy giver, from when they first appear on your legacy prospect list to when they notify you of their estate gift and move into a society stewardship phase. Now, when we talk about a donor's overall journey, there's a lot of different pieces to that journey, right? There's an acquisition piece where they first learn about your organization and decide to make their first gift. There's a renewal piece when they decide to make that repeat gift. Maybe they become a sustainer, or maybe they move into a mid-level or a major giving program. But today we're talking about their journey as legacy givers. Now, I love the outdoors. Here at Stelter, I actually get to work in our environmental and animal welfare team. It's an absolute dream for me. So to me, this journey makes a lot of sense when we think about it as a hiking trail, a journey to a summit. And this is our map. So we can think about our prospect's journey in 5 phases. We start out in that kind of bottom left corner at the trailhead in our supporting phase. Now, there's a lot that your organization has already done to get these donors here, right? Not all supporters of your organization are ready for this journey. They haven't yet made it to that trailhead. But by being smart about who we're targeting with legacy marketing, using a lot of that information, those metrics that Katie just shared with us, we can have confidence that we're targeting the prospects who are ready to start down this path. Now, once they leave the supporting trailhead, they move through our 5 phases. So they go into the forests of the discovering phase, and then they hike through the alpine lakes and meadows of our considering phase, then really start to climb in that deciding phase, and finally acting on their decision and approaching the summit, where they notify you, the nonprofit, of their gift. So at each phase in this journey, we have several waypoints or behaviors that the donor engages in that each mark their progress. So knowing these waypoints helps us identify opportunities to introduce touch points or marketing messages that can move donors further down their path. So let's dig into each of these. We're starting at our supporting trailhead. This is phase 1 of 5. Now, this is where supporters first enter the journey. They have shown that they care about your organization's mission through regular gifts or volunteer activities. This is how they were identified as legacy prospects. Your organization got the donor here by building trust, by telling them how grateful you are for their commitment to the cause, sending them timely thank you messages, showing them the impact their gift is making, showing them evidence of your success. So what are we watching for in this portion of the trail? What does this phase look like? Well, we're looking for deepening engagement. Maybe the donor is starting to give to you more or more often. Maybe they're engaging through other ways, things like participating in advocacy related to your mission, or championing the cause through peer-to-peer campaigns, maybe taking on volunteer roles. Once we leave the trailhead, we move into phase 2, that discovering forest. This is about building the relationship, helping your donors feel important and appreciated, that their gifts matter, and giving them ways to strengthen their engagement and ways to voice their opinions. Survey can be a great tool for giving donors autonomy and a way to have their voice heard. Maybe your organization interacts with donors on social media, or maybe you invite them to events that allow them to meet experts and ask questions. Here we're also introducing the idea of legacy gifts as a way to extend the donor support and have an even bigger impact on this cause that they care about. We know that 2 in 3 American adults don't yet have a will. So part of closing the gap between where they are and where we want them to be is making them aware that they need a will and that estate planning is for everyone. Katie mentioned that Giving USA, Leaving a Legacy study. I love this study. It has so many important takeaways, but one was that the most common way Americans learn about legacy giving is by hearing about it from a nonprofit, either through a mailing or through a conversation. So making them aware of this way to give is an important waypoint on their journey. Legacy marketing can also educate donors that there are people at the nonprofit who specialize in estate planning and that these people are available as resources for them as they make their plans. So what are we watching for from donors at this phase? We're looking for high engagement. You've heard it said that plan givers are often an organization's closest friends. So these are the ones that are regularly attending events. Maybe they're in leadership volunteer roles. Donors in this phase may also be engaging with estate planning educational content. So we can look for activities like email click-throughs or web traffic on content that introduces legacy giving, content that answers questions like, do I need an estate plan? Or interest in tools that make taking that first step easier. Next, donors move into the considering phase. This is phase 3 of 5. Here, donors are beginning to think about their values and their future legacy. They're considering their long-term plans and commitments. How will they provide for their family? And what causes are most important to them? As is true with many alpine hikes, donors who make it to this phase will often want to hang out here for a while. The alpine lakes and meadows are beautiful, right? They can sit and reflect on their life and their priorities and what they want to be their legacy. Donors with families and those who support multiple causes might maybe weighing priorities. Do they wish to leave money to family members? If so, how much? How else do they want to be remembered? Your organization wants to be top of mind when donors reflect on the important people and causes in their life. This may mean reminding them of the important role your organization has had in their life story. I think about Russell James and the fMRI study he did a few years ago, how he talks about that bequest decision-making process as donors visualizing the last chapter in their autobiography. Where does your organization play a role in their story? Maybe it's because your nonprofit helped them or helped a loved one directly, or maybe it's a way for them to live out their values or create some change that they want to see in the world. As people consider their legacy, they're looking into the future and they want to picture how things will be different because they lived. So watch for interest in your organization's vision and interest in whether you've had a track record of success that makes achieving that vision more likely. We can help donors in this phase by giving them content and tools to aid this reflection, and by continuously affirming their importance and their connection to your mission. Now, once donors are ready to continue on the trail, they enter the deciding phase. This is phase 4 of 5. Now, I call this section the deciding boulder field because this section of the trail gets harder. There can be obstacles in the donor's way that they have to overcome. So psychologically, donors at this stage are integrating your nonprofit with their identity. So in Russell James's work, this is what allows for that idea of death transcendence or living on through an estate gift. Social proof can be effective at all stages of a donor's journey, but at this phase, it can nudge giving decisions by establishing legacy giving as a social norm, making the donor feel this is what people like me do. At this phase, donors are having conversations with trusted advisors and loved ones to help them make decisions. So content here can focus on removing barriers to these conversations, how to talk with family members, what experts can help guide estate planning decisions, what questions to ask those experts. Donors in this phase may also be researching which gifts might be best for their goals. They may research options on their own that can look like increased web traffic or downloading digital guides, particularly of gift vehicle specific content. This is a great point for your organization to come alongside these donors and help them determine how best to structure a gift that helps them achieve the impact that they want to have. So we also want to use marketing to encourage them to connect and consult with your gift officers. In our last phase, donors have made their decision and the summit of their journey is in sight. They're now in the acting phase. Our waypoints in this phase are to connect with estate planning professionals. Donors making a bequest need to connect with their estate planning attorney, and they may request or view bequest language to share with their attorney. Donors making beneficiary designations need to update their beneficiary forms, whether that's online or through a plan administrator. Finally, and importantly, they choose to notify you, the nonprofit, of their gift. This is the pinnacle of their journey, and it's what triggers them being pulled off of your plan giving prospect list and moved into a stewardship program. Now, climbing to a summit is challenging, so messaging at this phase is all about helping to make it easier, giving donors step-by-step actions to take, and asking about giving decisions or incentivizing donors to share their intentions like we do through legacy match challenges. Now, I think we're ready for some of Nathan's anecdotes. Nathan, you've spent a lot of time in the field and a lot of time talking with nonprofit professionals. How does this relate to some of the conversations that you've had?
Yeah, no, again, I just love the way you kind of navigated this. See how we're using that, this journey and kind of the analogies, and as you mentioned, in true Kit form around the hiking and outdoors. So, again, it's a really great blueprint, and while obviously everyone's journey is unique to them, this gives us a literal map for how, when, why to engage donors. And it should be noted that one of the best parts of our job in the plan giving world is really what follows that acting part. As we know, decisions can evolve, life changes, and there can be a reconsidering phase as well. And so I think stewardship is also a critical thing for folks to keep in mind too. And in fact, I know one of my colleagues from I think the CGP board or somewhere, it just stuck with me a couple of years back, shared with me one of the biggest differences he's seen in his career between major gifts and planned gifts is that majority of the work in major gifts is done pre-gift. Hey, I want to do something. And in plan giving, majority of the work tends to be after we've been notified. It's, how do we continue to build and make sure they understand that we're good stewards? And we all know the old adage, your best plan giving prospect is somebody who's already made a planned gift. So I think 2020 really set this up nicely from a stewardship standpoint, is because it allowed a lot of charities, a lot of fundraisers to think maybe even a little bit different around stewardship and the critical part that plays. That has always been something that people say, I don't have enough time for, or yes, we need to do more, but last year there was time. And I think, the old adage or the old way of thinking around, well, it's an event, it's a gala, it's a lapel pin. That's changed, and it's really more one of the hopefully silver linings of the pandemic was the authenticity, creating real genuine connections with folks. I know some of the best examples I saw were locally here in Des Moines with the Des Moines Symphony Orchestra. They did an online kind of peek into the concertmaster's home and kind of being able to kind of share, since they couldn't have patrons in the viewing their performance. They brought the performance to them. Another one of our children's hospital clients, I think, did an amazing thing in the spring where they just sent out a note around the importance of, it was a thank you to their legacy folks. And there was nothing about, request a gift illustration or would you like to learn more? The only ask that they had was, would you like to share? And they included a note card, words of encouragement for the families and children that we support. So again, I think as Kit continues to share more insights into how these mindsets are developed, it's really important to kind of keep in the back of your mind, the role that stewardship can play as well. So Kit, great stuff. I will hand it back to you.
Thanks, Nathan. I love the insights that you share. So I appreciate your contribution there. So now I want you all to think about your donors. Think about a specific legacy prospect if you can. What types of communication is that donor receiving? Every encounter that each one of your donors has with your organization, whether that's a direct response marketing touch point or a conversation they have, maybe an event that they attend, they all contribute to their overall donor experience. So how can we make sure that these encounters are most productive? Well, a lot of it comes down to donor psychology and helping donors think about your organization in a certain way, helping them develop certain mindsets that are common of legacy givers. There are 7 mindsets that we try to cultivate in legacy prospects through our marketing messaging here at Stelter. And today we're going to dig into 4 of these mindsets. I'm going to talk about each and then look at some tactics and examples of these mindsets in action. So our first mindset is this organization is trustworthy. Trust is an important element of any giving decision, right? But it's especially important to boomers and maturers. They want to feel confident in their giving investments. It's even more important for a legacy giving decision. Legacy donors know that they aren't going to be around to see their gift being realized. So they have to trust the organization that they are giving to. Now, there are 3 things that donors cite most often as helping bring trust. The first is a third-party evaluation or someone else telling them this organization is trustworthy. The second is name recognition. And the third is accomplishments that are shared by the organization. Donors also expect a certain amount of professionalism, like spelling their name correctly on a direct mail piece and responding to inquiries in a timely manner. When organizations mess things like that up, it can erode trust and create a barrier to legacy giving. Legacy donors also have to trust that the organization will continue to be around in order to achieve their lasting legacy. What you see on the screen here is a question from that Giving USA Leaving a Legacy study that we've mentioned. It asked donors, what are the top factors besides mission in choosing the organization to receive your largest gift? So we can see track record of success. That's number 1 here at about 65%. Having this track record of accomplishments and telling your donors about the impact that your organization is making through their gifts, that's what establishes donor loyalty. It's what helps your donors feel confident that their legacy gifts will have the impact that they want them to have. But then the rest of the top 5 are all items relating to trust. So expect organization to be around a long time was the second most popular reason. If the organization ceases to exist, then the donor's lasting impact does too. Firsthand knowledge comes next. These are people who have worked or volunteered with an organization who have built their trust on their firsthand experiences. And then respect leadership and manages money wisely. Those round out the top 5. So a couple tactics for us here. The first tactic is to celebrate your anniversaries. We want to highlight longevity by promoting milestones, like providing quality education for 100 years. Or here in our example, join us as we celebrate 50 years of caring for children. And our second tactic is to include trust indicators. So these are visuals, like maybe badges, that nonprofits can include in their collateral when they've received a high rating or ranking from a third-party evaluator. So things like Better Business Bureau seals, or US News rankings, or GuideStar seals of transparency. In the case of our example here, highlighting a 4-star Charity Navigator rating and a sidebar on Why Feeding America. The next mindset I want to talk about is I am connected to this work. Now, giving is emotional, right? When people give, they feel good. You've probably read about the emotional boost that donors get from giving, the release of feel-good chemicals like oxytocin and serotonin. It's that warm glow of giving. Also endorphins, or the helper's high. As fundraisers, we can help donors feel good by closing the loop between a donor's gift and the impact of that gift. The more specificity we can give, the better. This is also about donors' personal connections or places where an organization and the donor's life story intersect. We talk about this in our considering phase, the Alpine Lakes section of our journey. This is really a mindset where we see some nuance by nonprofit sector. In higher ed and in healthcare, donors are often motivated by looking back at their life. They're giving out of gratitude for their education or the care that they received. Those of you in medical research or in environmental organizations, your donors may often be motivated by looking ahead, wanting to fix something or preserve something that's important to them, such as protecting a historic site, finding a cure for cancer, or stopping climate change. So our tactics here. The first is to tell specific stories. Build connection and increase donor satisfaction by being specific in who is being helped. Those specific details help donors feel a greater sense of impact. We have an example here from Iowa State University. And in it, we see a scholarship recipient, Joselle. We see her picture and we can read her words describing how relieved and grateful she was to have a scholarship that helped her with books and with tuition. Another tactic is to mirror donors' identities whenever possible. So when you're in one-on-one conversations or in segmented marketing campaigns, we can match stories of those being helped with donors' identities, whether that's by matching gender, geography, college major, or other relevant descriptors. Another tactic is to remind donors of their connection. We want to spur donors to reflect on their connection, whether that's a physical time and place connection to your organization or through shared values. So we want to ask them how they first became connected to you and why. There's a great video I'm going to play here. It does an amazing job of speaking to this mindset and outlining the donor's whys. This example is from Concordia University in Montreal, and I want you to listen for all the reasons that the donor gives for why she is making her gift. We're going to hear her talk about all the places where Concordia has been part of her life story, as well as great examples from our next mindset, an estate gift is a smart choice.
For me, it's more about applauding the life that my parents gave me and applauding the work that my father's done. Both of my parents valued education very, very much. And in that role as parents, they gave me those values as well. My father was the first chancellor of Concordia. He was very present during the negotiations that created Concordia. So it's been part of my life for a very long time. I too was a student at Loyola. I graduated in 1970. My husband was a student at Concordia. I met him, he's my college sweetheart. He also worked here at Concordia as university librarian. I've stayed connected with Concordia largely through the fact that my husband worked here. It kind of was a coming back for us. As a person who worked in healthcare, benefiting people has always been my life goal. I had made a decision to make a bequest to Concordia in my parents' name, but I also realized as I was getting older and that my financial security was less at risk, that I could afford to do something in the near future. So I decided to create a scholarship immediately in the name of my parents. It will be for women of the Indigenous culture. I think planned giving is really important because so often we arrive at an end point and we haven't made a decision about what to do with what we have in this world. And so I really take enormous pleasure, but also I feel enormously confident that this is a decision that will help society and will benefit people.
So our next mindset is an estate gift is a smart choice. This is the idea of death transcendence and thinking about how we want to be remembered, as well as how our life can have the biggest impact. So think back to that donor you just heard speak. For her, her gift was about those autobiographical connections, her father's role at the university as the first chancellor of Concordia, her and her husband's experiences as students, her husband's experiences as a university librarian. But it was also about honoring her parents and helping their legacy live on through her tribute gift. You heard her say she was applauding the life that her parents gave her and the work that her father's done. And she described perpetuating the values her parents had passed on to her, the value of education. As humans age, we become more reflective about our legacy and what we'll leave behind. There's a developmental psychologist named Erik Erikson who theorized that humans go through 8 stages of psychosocial development. The final 2 stages, 7 and 8, align with the age of our typical legacy giving prospects. So let's zoom in on those 2 stages. As many of us get older, we begin wanting to help the next generation. This is us developing feelings of generativity. In Erikson's work, generativity aligns with middle adulthood. In this stage, we begin to think about the mark that we want to make on the world. Often we're doing that through parenthood or through our work. People at this stage feel successful when they feel like they're actively contributing to their communities. So you can connect with donors at this stage by showing them how their gifts can benefit their communities, and especially how they'll help the next generation, which is this natural fit for legacy giving. Erikson theorizes that humans enter the last stage of development when they begin to tackle their own mortality. So this is often triggered by life events, such as retirement or maybe the loss of a loved one. People at this stage are reflecting back on their life and considering whether they've lived a meaningful life. They feel successful when they have few regrets and when they feel like they're leaving behind something that will last. So maybe that's grandkids, or maybe it's another meaningful contribution. You can connect with donors at this stage by showing them how their contributions, whether financial or volunteer, how those have been meaningful, and by helping them achieve permanence through a legacy gift. So 2 tactics here. Our first is to use permanence language. When we frame messaging around lasting impacts, things like legacy, endowments, and how gifts will help the future generations. What you see on the screen is a legacy homepage for Carnegie Hall. The headline is a clear case for support that uses permanence language. Keep the music alive for the next generation. Another tactic is to offer useful estate planning tools. We can provide resources, things like an estate inventory that will make estate planning preparations easier. So our example here is a direct mail insert for World Wildlife Fund. It's offering a complimentary planner, a personal record estate planning that you can do at home. Now, Nathan, I'm going to invite you back. You talk with a lot of organizations about how to best approach kind of these estate planning conversations. What information can you share with us?
Yeah, thanks, Kit. A ton of great things to kind of unpack there that you just walked us through. And I think it's extremely important to kind of understand as we navigate this continuing evolution of donor conversations and decision making. So I'll provide a little color commentating because we can spend a lot of time on some of this, but I think that first thing you started with trust. Trust is really, really critical, especially in the world that we live in. The nature of playing gifts. People aren't going to be around to see the good work the dollars do. So some of the things you talked about around the messaging is really critical. In fact, around this time last year, I remember reading an article on LinkedIn's Marketing Solutions blog, but it was around the role of trust in today's environment. And while things have shifted and things are getting back to whatever the next normal is, we all know that unknown has pervaded every aspect of our life the last couple of years. And so that blog really kind of talked to or spoke to the critical difference between reputation and trust. And I bring that up just because I think when you talk about trust, it's important because reputation is largely how a lot of people have come to know us, come to know organizations, and it's a reflective measure. It reflects really what you or the organization has done. Trust is different. It's more predictive. And so it's really hard for people to get their head around. And that's why it's really important, like some of the language or even the examples you shared, to remind people of the good work that you're doing, to make sure. I love that video as well about, kind of the connection. Because right now, things are changing still weekly, monthly, and seeing into the future and being able to trust is still a little bit murky. So I think that's a really great point. I'd also say, it's important to kind of continue to beat that drum of being a good investment. As being good stewards of this, again, trying to make that connection, authentic relationship building. This is where that really plays a role. So understanding and embracing the connections and doing those smart things there to connect the why is critically important. And I guess before I hand it back to you, because I know we still have some good content to get through in the next 18 minutes here, it's really critical to keep in mind, again, that many donors' path to a planned gift is kind of that traditional marketing or gift pyramid, the donor pyramid. In fact, about 59% of donors come through that, where they start as a suspect, annual giving, repeat, major, kind of the aspiration has been planned gift. But it's really important to remember too, that people can come in contact with you a variety of different ways now, and at different points in their journey and at different points in their lives. And, we have clients, some large cancer centers or animal relief organizations where 50% of their gifts will come in from off the radar. And so it's not a traditional. So I bring that up because I think it's really important as you get into some of this next stuff here around creating opportunities for planned givers to make their intentions known, that, hey, we just need to be nimble, flexible, and really aware of where people are coming from. So I'll hand it back to you because I know you have some great stuff to share.
Thanks, Nathan. I love that input. Thank you. Well, that brings us exactly to our final mindset we're going to be chatting about, which is I need to share my intentions. Why do we want donors to tell you about their gifts? Well, it's really helpful from a marketing perspective, right? It helps us justify marketing investment and see what's working so that we can do more of it. It also helps us segment legacy audiences by donor and by prospect. But more than that, it's important for both donors and organizations. The very act of estate planning prompts donors to consider the legacy that they wish to leave, and then devise a plan that reflects those wishes. So by discussing their gift with the organization they plan to support, donors can make sure that their gift is structured in the best way possible to achieve what they want to achieve. But most donors who make legacy gifts, they still don't share the good news. That Leaving a Legacy study we've talked about, it asked donors what keeps them from sharing news of their gifts. And the most common reasons were not wanting special recognition, wanting to retain control, and not wanting to be asked for other gifts. 12% of donors surveyed said they haven't disclosed their gift simply because they haven't been asked. For donors to complete the donor journey, their hike to the summit, and move into a great stewardship cycle, donors also need to develop this final mindset and share their intention. So helping donors establish this mindset is really about educating them on the benefits and asking them in the right way. Two tactics here. Our first is to make it easy. We want to ask legacy prospects to notify the organizations of their gift intentions and provide easy ways for them to do so using terms that speak to the donor's intentions for giving. So the examples you have on the screen, on the left, you see a simple notification form on a plan giving website. The language here thanks donors for their generosity and says, by letting us know, we can ensure that we fulfill your gift exactly as you intended. The other example is a notification opportunity embedded in a survey question about the donor's likelihood to include a gift to that organization in their will. The question is, if you were to sign a will in the next 6 months, how likely would you be to include a gift to our organization? With the first response option there that you see, I already have. And our last tactic we're going to discuss is creating a reason to disclose. We can consider things like a legacy challenge to provide urgency for those gift notifications. So the example you see is a postcard promoting a legacy challenge from George Washington University, in which the university offered matching funds to make an immediate impact on the program of the donor's choice. It provides that urgent reason to notify the organization of their gift today. So that leads us into section 3 in our marketing methods. How do we market to prospects? And I'll turn it back over to Katie for that information.
Great. You've heard from Kit, you've heard from Nathan, you've heard from myself. And for just a moment, we want to hear from you. We're going to launch a poll here in Zoom. Jen, go ahead and kick us off on that front, asking you about your marketing. Are you primarily going with a conversion campaign, an educational campaign, a nice split, or you're not sure what I'm talking about? And in which case, I'm about to give you some definitions on these. Just looking for that set point. You can see the poll there. Jen, any instructions for them as they go?
No, just feel free to chime in. It is an anonymous poll, so don't feel weird about answering. We're not going to come back to you on it or ask you or call you out. Looks like we have about 60% of you who have answered so far. We'll leave it open for a few more seconds for anyone else who's just thinking about it, maybe still reading the answers. Conversion or educational marketing, mostly conversion, educational. Do you do a little bit of both, or maybe you just don't really know? Okay, our answers have trickled to a stop, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share it with you.
Mostly educational. I don't know if you can see the poll, but answers, we had the majority of, not majority, but about 37% saying mostly educational. Next best was the 50-50 split with about a third of you. Not sure, guess what? I've got a slide for you coming up. And mostly conversion was very low with that 4% of those who took the poll. Thank you for that. We always find that interesting. As we head into this final part of our presentation, I'm going to define for you the two areas and why you need both. So here's my definition. I think about education as inviting consideration, and I think about conversion as compelling action. So this whole time we've been talking about how legacy marketing is donor-centric. It's about where the donor is, not where, unfortunately, your organization is or your plan giving goals for the year. But different stages of that donor journey are going to call for different types of messaging. You're building that pipeline, which sounds like educational messaging. That supporting group is just learning about these opportunities, all the way through securing gift intentions, which is that conversion messaging. So we're going to propose that you need a two-pronged approach, those 50-50 split. Let's start with digging into education for just a moment. Education is that drip, drip, drip in the background. It is active whenever, wherever the donor is active. It's going to inspire with storytelling, dynamic visuals, big picture ideas. It's going to show what the problem is and how you are uniquely qualified and the donor is uniquely qualified to solve it through a legacy gift. It's going to assure the donor that your nonprofit is the best one suited to make that change. The content is going to be very inclusive. It's going to open its arms wide to the largest possible audience. It's going to plant the seed. Now, educational messaging can and should drive somewhere. You should demonstrate ROI. You should have a call to action, but its primary function is to be that billboard that you catch when you're driving in a car. So my analogy here is you drive by a McDonald's billboard and you're not going to stop necessarily right then. It's an advertisement for hot, salty French fries. That sounds really good, but there's no reason I need to pull over right now. You've planted the seed, maybe your lunch menu is under consideration, but not acting is a fine approach to a billboard. So let me show you in legacy marketing an example of education. This was an advertisement for Akron Community Foundation, and I consider it to be educational messaging. And here's why. It's general. It's that drip, drip, drip in the background. It's planting the seed, in this case, almost literally visually, with that opportunity to leave my mark. Its arms are open wide to truly everyone reading it. Feels very inclusive. Its language is inspiring. It's showing me how I can be part of solving a problem. It makes me consider the idea of leaving my mark, but it's not asking me to do it immediately. I can simmer. And my note here, I do think this ad is missing a call to action. We talked about how there's still an ROI story to tell. There should be something that a donor can do to act if they choose to do so. A phone number, an email address, a website, etc. But overall, this ad does a very nice job of introducing the concept of a gift and a will. As we know, people are going to make or change their wills overwhelmingly due to changes in health, wealth, or family, not because they received an advertisement from the Akron Community Foundation, if only. So this is that billboard I can drive by, I can vaguely remember, but I'm very comfortable acting in my own time. I also picked this example because it's short. Education does not mean long-winded or multi-page, though of course it absolutely can be. But by definition, I'm telling stories, and I'm telling them in the space that's needed to invite consideration. Its words and visuals are planting that seed. So sometimes these messages are longer, sometimes shorter. It's not length that distinguishes between education and conversion. It's the outcome you expect. What I love, educational messages are a welcome companion to my day. I can fit them into my schedule. They don't demand attention immediately. And a well-executed drip allows that donor to execute in their own timeline. They can leave their mark when they're ready, which may be the second time, the 7th time. It could be the 14th time they see an Akron campaign inviting them to do so. Is there anything more donor-centric than that? Now, conversion. So remember, my definition of conversion here, and it's that red piece that for me, it's loading right behind. There we go. My definition of conversion is that it compels action. It has qualities like directness, clarity, a follow-up action to take, urgency. There's something to do and a timeline to do it in. And I'm also reducing friction to take that next step. It should feel very easy. So back to my McDonald's billboard before I walk you through this ad. So there's French fries. The conversion billboard, a conversion campaign would tell me that the French fries are $1 this week only. It's direct, it's clear. There's only one obvious follow-up. That's to go to McDonald's immediately. But this sample, as we think about legacy giving, this came from our partner, Chi Omega, and it relies heavily on social proof. So you can see it's sharing Catherine's donor story in the form of a quote from her. It's helping me understand that people like me, in this case, my fellow Chi Omega sister, as I'm likely receiving this in a magazine to the sisters only, inviting me to do things like she did, which is give a gift to Chi Omega in my will. Kit talked about how social proof can be especially helpful during that deciding phase of a donor journey, and I see this ad at work there. It's cutting to the chase. When you make this gift, future sisters may never know me, but glory is not the promise here. It's opportunity. That visual is dynamic. It's showing me the donor with the collegians that she's inspiring. It's very specific. There's a subtle nod to timeline there in the top left, that 125th anniversary. It feels celebratory. It feels like something is happening right now. It also fulfills that donor mindset. This organization is trustworthy because Chi Omega has been around for a century plus. Now, again, a critique here. I think this ad could go a little further, could set a timeline for an anniversary match, could promote a free tool, could help me move on. As I look at our timeline here, I'm going to take you into this slide. We are nearing the end, and I do hope to get to some of your questions. But the case for both, as we said, education and conversion are both very important. Here's why. Typically, a third of all legacy giving donors are going to notify a nonprofit of their plans during their lifetime. 2/3 of those donors are going to keep their decision private. So the 1/3 is going to follow up on your efforts by calling you. The 2/3 are not. So you need that consistent drip to stay top of mind for those secret keepers, so they feel motivated by your ability to solve problems. And you're also needing to close the loop for those people who are willing to let you know. I'll take you a step further as we think about where these tactics come into play. And we talk about a morning smoothie, a mix of marketing channels, of conversion, of education, and thinking about our tactics in a very meaningful way, being where the donor is. So if you're tempted to go to just print, that's great. That's a proven method for the aging matures and boomers, but you're going to miss on that cheaper, more frequent storytelling opportunity, and that low friction conversion of online. But if you're tempted to go just digital, I could cite a 2019 study by Blackbaud where just 8.7% of total fundraising came from online giving, although that is on the rise. There's a lot of very positive trends. I could cite many from Network for Good about people who do multi-channel. Just know that the top fundraisers are where the donor is, and that's everywhere, including social media. A plug here that Facebook users are on the site daily, sometimes multiple times during the day. And if your brand is on Facebook, you can keep telling stories, you can keep interacting, you can keep asking questions and be part of their life story. want to make sure I have time for one more Nathan interjection. I know integrated marketing and those secret keepers are really important to you. So with our time here, I'd love to pass your way.
Sure. No, Katie, great stuff. And so there's some great questions coming in that I'm looking forward to addressing. But no, I do. I think it's really critical, and it's tough because I know a lot of fundraisers are juggling a lot of different things, but there are different ways you need to think about how you're engaging people. And education has largely been where we've been for a majority of, 20 years I've been in this industry. The conversion is getting more and more focused. And I think that air cover is what I call the education, constantly planting the seed, telling great stories, keeping people engaged, and then campaign focused is a really critical, where do they both live? And I'll just bring up one thing, and I think the integration you brought up right there at the end, I'll hand it back to you, is really important. Actually, just this morning, I don't know if you can see this, integrating digital and direct mail funder. This is just from Philanthropy Daily, came through my inbox. It is so important to not put, I think partially because it's really risky putting all your eggs in one basket, but it's really important to think how your message is. I shared this on Twitter, I shared this on LinkedIn because I thought it was really great this morning. But there's 3 universal truths that they note around why to do this. And again, I want to get to some of the meat of our stuff and the talks, but really at the end of the day, it's around keeping the themes consistent, not just staying in one lane or the other. Everybody should be receiving a lot of different channels and a lot of different communication in different ways. But again, that's a little color commentating. I'll hand it back and we can kind of close it down here.
Finally, 3 takeaways for you. I really want to get to your questions. So just a note here, if you only did 3 things, these are big things, but very important as you hit leave, don't hit leave yet. But 1, reach out to your list team. Are you targeting the right prospects? Are you thinking about those indicators and your volunteers? 2, do you know where your donors are on their journey? Do you have information or tools to help them discover, to help them consider, and to help them decide? Are you using those mindsets? And 3, to block some time on your calendar to look at your marketing plan. Are you conversion plus education to build that pipeline and also get some great leads? So that's our advice there. That is very high level, but I've seen a number of really great questions. And Jen, I don't know how much time we have here. You're our lead on this front.
Right. We don't have a lot of time. I'm sorry, we've actually hit 1 o'clock, but you know what, since we are recording this, I think let's go ahead and take some questions. Those that can stay on with us. Those that have to leave, that's fine. You can watch the recording later and get to the Q&A section. We just hate to not answer any of your questions. So let's try to get through some of them. One of the things early on that you talked about a lot, Katie, was an indicator of a good plan giving prospect with someone or a couple that does not have children. And this person is asking, how do you find that out? How do you know when people don't have children?
Great. This question comes up a lot with clients. I'm going to pass it Nate's way. He's got a couple good answers.
Yeah, no, obviously organically is the best way, but that takes time. Obviously finding that information out, updating your database accordingly. We found surveys have been a great tool. Obviously, a lot of folks are doing surveys to engage and understand passions and commitments. And that's been a great way to use some of that demographic space to find that information. But I'll also say, ironically today, I'm having a call with an organization that one of our clients referred us to called Touchpoints, and they seem to have solved part of this secret sauce of finding, those individuals in your database that don't have children. So I'd say surveys is probably the most straightforward right now, but there may be some other options out there. So stay tuned.
Great, thanks, Nate. You also talked a lot about volunteers, Katie, and how don't overlook your volunteers are often the most engaged people with your organization. And this person, it's Dee Dee. Hopefully you're still with us, Dee Dee. Do you recommend that you would ask a volunteer for a legacy gift if they've never given a gift in the past? And if so, maybe how would you approach that, Katie, Nathan?
Certainly being a volunteer means they're connected, but not having given to you in the past, I wonder if they're on other lists, if other of your departments are talking to them, that you might be able to introduce plan giving through a blended message. You're absolutely going to get surprise gifts from people like volunteers that were never on your radar, never gave you a gift. But I worry spending a lot of your marketing dollars on what could be a list that isn't quite primed and ready. They're not quite in that supporting stage for plan giving yet. That may not be where I'd point my dollars. So it's a little situational. If you're in person, you should absolutely be having those kind of conversations and collateral available, or blending the messaging with other departments who probably are talking to those volunteers about gifts.
Yeah, I would quickly agree, just because I don't think it's an all or nothing on volunteers. There's been the old adage that, well, they give up their time, so they're not going to. That's not always necessarily true. And I use my uncle Steve, who was with our company for 25, 30 years. And I know with the work he's done with the Children's Hospital in his backyard, that has changed his philanthropic intentions. So I think there is a really great place to bridge and to have that kind of conversation.
I think that goes really well, kind of dovetails in with Cecilia's question when you're talking about, where do you spend your marketing dollars? Do you spend them on volunteers? Cecilia has, and recently has received 3 or 4 large bequest gifts from people who are what she would consider a lapsed donor that haven't given in anywhere between 10 to 20 years. So kind of been off their radar. What do you suggest about that? How often should you be marketing to them, people that are lapsed?
I'm happy to kind of jump in there on that one, because it's you're never going to find everybody. As smart as we're getting with identifying the right list for the right conversation at the right time, there's always going to be folks. I do think there is opportunity, though. And again, it varies on how big those lapsed donor lists look, what other types of marketing or priorities you have, but to do kind of re-engagement opportunities. Maybe they've fallen off, because we do know folks, they care deeply about us, or they've cared deeply about us at some point, and to offer them a chance to just re-engage and telling stories, showing how you're having an impact, or how gifts like this have had an impact. I think there's really smart ways to do that. It's not something you want to spend a ton of time on, but I think we've seen some nice success with that.
We have a question around educating donors on just letting them know that they can be anonymous, but they can still tell the organization that they've given a gift and not lose that anonymity. Do you have suggestions on how to go about tackling that?
Yep, I'm happy to go again. It's just, no, I think I'm a big fan of being direct and trying to take away objections that we already know might be there. And so if it's in marketing, or even if it's one-on-one, it's, many donors like to keep these types of gifts. It's using some of that language as well, like Dr. James references, like to keep these gifts anonymous, but it really helps us to better understand, so we have an idea of how we can better use or make sure your dollars are used as you wish. So again, opening that conversation. You're not saying you want to restrict it per se, because we love unrestricted, but opening that door for conversation, really on hey, this can help. And it's fine to remain. Actually, a good chunk of donors like to remain anonymous.
Katie, you talked a lot about educational versus conversion towards the end. 2 questions to that. One, would you recommend putting both types of content in the same piece? And then beyond that, if you work at an organization that's really very conversion focused, how do you convince them that education content is also important?
Oh, I love that question. To combine them both is a little bit of a mixed message. So you're trying to present ideas, but you want them to do something. I do think you always need a call to action. You've got a self-directed donor that's going to take that next step regardless of what you've asked them to do, or they're going to research you. But I'd be pretty single-minded in my marketing pieces and think about what's my ROI here? Where is that donor? What is the best tool for them to take that next step? And as far as justifying the budget, that's huge. I think you've got to set benchmarks that help you understand where the donors are in the journey, what your plan is to move them, what you'll learn along the way. I understand that's a great stressor as you try to fulfill immediate needs, get phone calls, get those warm leads. So that's why that mix is in play. You can use something like a survey tool to get some leads while sprinkling in educational marketing to build that pipeline. Kit, did I miss anything in that thought process?
I think just keeping in mind the pipeline that you're working with. So making sure, if you're only converting, you're going to run out of people who are in the early phases of their journey. So having that case for both can make sure that you always have people who are in those later phases that you can be having those conversion conversations and messaging for.
Okay, we are losing most of our audience. So I'm just going to throw one more out and then we'll move on to the very end. Here's a question about a lot of our digital marketing and tracking people that are clicking on links, clicking on articles. Recommendations for following up with these people that have clicked without it seeming like your big brother watching over them.
Ooh, can I answer that one?
Nathan.
In all honesty, I kind of like using the old Columbo approach. Even though full and well that they've clicked on, it's a great chance just to call and thank somebody, and just use it as a stewardship call. And you know, that open-ended fact finding is really beneficial. I mean, part of the, you know, good, better, and different world that we live with the digital insights is you have that opportunity to see when somebody's engaged and paying attention. Obviously, yeah, you don't want to say, hey, I just saw you click on that. But it's really great for us to, again, you can time a thank you call, stewardship call. I mean, I could go on and tell great stories about clients that have used that, saying, hey, I'm going to be out in your neck of the woods. They had no plans on that initially. And they're like, oh yeah, I was just paying attention to this, that, and the other, and ended up resulting in a nice gift. So I think there's smart ways to do that, but it's a great question, because, you know, nobody wants to be perceived as big brother. Even
Absolutely.
I'm a big brother to two big.
Okay, well, you guys, thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and just wrap things up here. Thanks to those of you who have stayed on the line with us. There were a couple questions we didn't get to today. So if you have a burning question we didn't answer, you can reach out to Katie or Kit. There's their addresses on the screen: kate.parker@Stelter, kristen.lancaster@Stelter. You can always reach out to myself or Nathan if you have questions about our webinar series or about Stelter's products or services. And then finally, one of the questions I answered a lot in the chat was, this is amazing. I need the handouts. When can I have the recording? So yes, we've recorded it. So as long as everything went well, I'll be putting the recording and the handouts on stelter.com/webinars. I hope to have them up by Friday, and I will be emailing everyone to let you know when they're actually there. So thank you, Katie. Thank you, Kit. Nathan, nice to see you as always. And thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. Go to stelter.com/webinars and register for our next webinar in June. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.